one of our newer members, and who's your mentor, Jeff? Is it my dad?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. You want to introduce him, mentor Dave?
I'd be happy to introduce Jeff. What happened there? Anyway, he and his father owned a publishing company, printing company over in Snohomish. And I believe they either sold it or retired, but as a retired guy, he spends a ton of his time volunteering with Catholic Community Services. So oftentimes he's not available to come to our meetings on Thursday because guess what? He's doing service. So welcome, Jeff, and we look forward to your classification talk.
Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. I was kind of thinking that I'd be going before the rest of the meeting, and I'd try to hurry through it so I didn't have to talk very long and you didn't have to look at me the whole time, because I don't have any idea how to put pictures up on this thing. So anyhow, but I can also see that it's 12:45, and I think we like try to be done by 1, so I'm still going to try to hurry through it. So anyhow, again, my name is Jeff Wise. I've lived in Arlington here now for about 9 years, and was talked into joining, by both Jennifer and Simona, and both my wife and I. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and try to leave more of my wife's part of it out in case she ever gets around to doing her classification talk. So I was born in Palo Alto, California. I'm 61 years old. After living in Palo Alto for only about a year, my mom and I moved back to where she was from, which was Spokane, and then to Oak Harbor, where she met my dad, and got married there, and then Edmonds, where I went to grade school, and then to Snohomish, where I went to high school. And so I don't know if a few of you are booing now because of the Arlington-Snohomish rivalry, but when I was there, we were in different leagues, so it didn't really matter too much. Again, I did go to grade school in Edmonds, and up through the first couple of years of junior high in Edmonds, I was about to start 9th grade when we moved to Snohomish. And in Edmonds, they had a 3-year junior high and a 3-year high school. So I was about to be top dog in junior high. But we moved to Snohomish, we had a 4-year high school, so I became a freshman in high school and had to wait another 4 years before I could be top dog anyway. After Snohomish, I went to Western Washington University and graduated there with a business degree. Right now, like I said, I live in Arlington, and prior to that, I lived in Lake Stevens for 30 years. I was married to my first wife in 1981. We had 2 kids. My daughter Brianne is 34, and my son Brent is 32. Lived in Lake Stevens for 26 years up until my wife passed away from cancer in 2007. I met Lynn, my wife now, in 2010 at a Relay for Life, which was an organization that raised money for cancer research. I don't know if anybody are familiar with Relay for Life, but it is a annual event that's held in lots of different places, where you have a team that is ideally supposed to keep a walk around the track over the course of about 20 hours. And so people spend the night there, and they have large teams that take the baton and go out and walk around the track, raise money for cancer research. Anyhow, we were married in 2011. She works at her family business called Cement Distributors Incorporated, which is out by the airport. Together we have 5 kids and a dog, Dottie, a dachshund, miniature dachshund, and 4 grandkids. My wife her oldest daughter has 2 girls, And my daughter and her husband have two boys, and they are great fun to have around. We get to see them quite a lot. My granddaughters live in Marysville, so they're quite close. And my daughter and her family live down in Longview, so about 3 hours away, but we do get to see them quite often when they come up or we go down there. Let's see. Both my daughter and son went to Western Washington University also and graduated from there. My daughter graduated with a master's degree in psychology and centered on seniors, and is now down in Longview with the Cowlitz County Senior Services Program. And she's a director of different programs down there. Her husband, Miles, is in construction with his dad, and they do a lot of work now, are from the Longview area and quite well known down there. My son graduated from Western with a bachelor's in automotive design and manufacturing, and he and his wife now live down in Half Moon Bay, California, which is just south of San Francisco. And he's worked for Tesla, Google, and one of their subsidiaries called Loon, which was a company that was making weather balloons and outfitting them with internet packages that they could launch up into the stratosphere to provide internet in areas that don't generally have it, in third world countries, areas that have been hit by disasters, things like that. He was there for a few years, then he moved to Zoox, which is a startup company in San Francisco that was making autonomous ride-sharing vehicles and service. And now he's back at Google again in a division called Waymo that does their autonomous vehicles. And his wife also works at Google. Let's see, first job after school, basically was working with my dad at Snohomish Publishing, a printing business that he had in Snohomish. And I would go in after school, so I could just walk down from the high school and work in the afternoons and the evenings and do various different things, usually just manual type tasks, gathering papers together, collating the sections of books together, and sometimes actually flying on the presses, which means taking the papers off the presses and stacking them up. And if anybody's ever seen the old Lucy show where she's trying to take the chocolate balls off the conveyor belt and put them in the right place, flying a press can be a lot like that because the press doesn't slow down. You just have to keep going and taking them off and piling them up. So that was how I spent most of my after school and summers. One summer, though, when I was in college, I did work as a marshal at Mill Creek Golf Club. And that was rather interesting. I'd been playing a lot of golf at that point in time. And so one of the things that had to be done was to encourage members that were falling behind groups ahead of them to catch up. But I couldn't really tell them to do that. So I had to go about it rather obtusely, than just saying, well, how's everything going out here? Is there anything I can do to help you? And make sure you're having a good time. And a lot of times it didn't work to get the people going, but that was what my job was. After that, after I graduated from Western, I started working full-time at the printing company and took it over from my dad. My partner and I took it over from him in about 1995. And he and I ran the business until 2007 when I left the company and retired. And he took it over and kept running from there. What we did was mostly do newspapers, books, and magazines. We did a lot of the local newspapers for different towns around. With the advent of the internet, when I basically, or the computers, personal computers, when I started working there after school, everybody said, well, printers are going to dry up because everything will be on a computer. Well, that turned out to be just the opposite at that point in time, because everybody needed to print out the stuff that they got done on their computers and publish it sometimes. And we did a lot of that. Also worked with people who self-published books. A lot of you probably know who Rick Steves is. When he did his first book, he came to us to do it. He traveled around Europe and kept notes and put it together in a book called Europe Through the Back Door. And he came to us to print that for him. And we printed a lot of stuff for him for a long time until he basically got wooed away by a publisher that was going to take over all the publications that he had. We also printed a book for a gentleman called Paul Rivera. I don't know if any of you know him. I think he's out of the Stanwood area. He's passed now for quite some time. But he'd written a book, How to Carve Totem Poles. And it was quite a large book and lots of color pictures in it. He went to a number of different publishers trying to see if they would buy the rights for the book and publish it for him. He had one guy tell him, if I sold 2 copies of this book, I'd flood the market. And so he came to us and we helped him get it printed. And he did a first run of 500, which was kind of a typical for a first run of a small book like that. He ended up selling them out and coming back and reprinting the book probably 7 or 8 times at about 500 to 1,000 each printing. And did great by it. And he had a lot of publishers coming to him afterwards saying, hey, I'd like to take that book on and pay you royalties to take it and do it. And he said, nope, I'm never going to go to you guys. I'm happy where I'm at. You turned me away when I came by the first time. I don't want to deal with you now. So anyhow, that's the kind of thing we did at the printing company. Another thing that we had there was a 4-color printing unit, which was a little bit not necessarily odd, but a new design that my dad and an inventor that built printing presses had come up with when probably 30 years ago now. And they had worked on getting the first one of them printed or built in India. And so my dad and he would go back to India quite often to check on the progress of it. And the first unit of it was set up in our print shop in Snohomish. And the thing that made the unit special is that at that time, most printing units that would print 4 colors on both sides of a sheet of paper for newspapers were huge. They would be 20 to 25 feet tall and had to have a huge building to hold them. A lot of small printers, like we were actually, that did like weekly newspapers, couldn't afford to put in something that big, mostly because it would take up a whole building to house it. So he came up with an idea to condense it down to where the printing unit itself was about 6 feet tall. It could have the roll of paper underneath of it, and it wouldn't be, would still fit inside of a normal building. And so we got the prototype unit and set it up in our shop and ran that for quite some time. And then the inventor, sold it to a company called WebPress Corporation in Tacoma. And they have been building it ever since. And we got one of their units also. So we had 2 of them that we used in our printing company. My partner, after he bought me out, ran the business for about another 5 or 6 years. And by that time, the internet really was cannibalizing what we did best. Small authors could publish their books online, didn't have to actually have printed copies of them if they didn't want to. If they did, they could get them printed one-off using copiers. A lot of the weekly newspapers were bought up by a group called Sound Publishing, who actually owns the Herald now, and a lot of the little papers from around the area. So that kind of dried up for us. And he found he was competing with a lot of the bigger printers on the bigger jobs, which he could do, but just wasn't making any money at it. So he decided to close the business down in, I think it was 2015. Since then, he and I have been doing the property management for the building we live in, and we rent it out now. There's a thrift shop that's in there, and we also rent out to a bunch of um, um, little offices for people to use. Especially now with a lot of people working from home, they find that working from home isn't quite as nice as having an office to go to. So they'll rent a small office from us to do their work from home. Since I got out of the business in 2007, I have been a driver for Catholic Community Services. I will volunteer doing that, and I will take a lot of the clients Catholic Community Services have to doctor's appointments or shopping and things like that. And I do that anywhere from a couple times a week to 5 or 6 times a week. Typically, it's just one person a day because most of the people are having their appointments in the middle of the day, and it takes time to go to their house to pick them up and take them where they need to go. There's been a number of times when it's been an all-day situation, especially if I have to go up to Darrington, pick somebody up and take them down into Seattle or even south of Seattle, and then back home to Darrington when they're done. So that can be an all-day thing. Hobbies I have, I used to ski. I haven't done that in probably about 12 or 13 years. Also golf. I golfed in high school and in college on the golf teams. I went to Everett Community College for a year to play golf there for one season, in Western Washington for 3 years, but only played 2 years of golf there because I graduated after winter quarter my 4th year, and golf was until spring. I started skiing at about 7 and started golf at about 14. The oddest thing about that is that the worst thing I did to hurt myself wasn't actually skiing, it was golfing. Skiing, I fell one time and just on the beginning of a vacation, we'd gone down to Lake Tahoe to have a ski vacation for a week. And the first day out, kind of icy, and I hit a chunk of ice, fell, and broke the tip of my thumb. Didn't realize it until I was getting up and checking myself out, and realized that when I bent my thumb down, the tip of my thumb back the other direction. So figured I'd better go find out how to get that taken care of. So I skied down to a bottom of a chair and said, "Hey, I think I broke my thumb." So they called the ski patrol, and I was still in the middle of the mountain at that time. But I did get to ride down on one of the sleds that they use, and got all the way down to the bottom, and we had to go figure out how to get someplace to get my thumb set. So that was the worst I ever did skiing. But playing golf, I actually tore up my knee. And that's kind of an embarrassing story, but I figured, what the heck, I can't actually see all you people to tell you now, so I won't see you laughing at me. But anyhow, I was playing golf, and I just got done with the 18th hole and just missed my 5th or 6th 2-foot putt. So I flung my putter off the green towards my bag, stomped over there, and decided I didn't like that putter, and I was going to jump on it and break it. So I jumped up in the air, and in midair, I decided that, if I do that, I'm just going to have to buy another putter. I don't have a lot of money. I don't want to buy a new putter. So I kind of spread my feet apart. When I landed, my right knee collapsed, tore the cartilage, and partial tear in a ligament. And that actually kept me from playing football next year in Snohomish. Not that I would have done much, because I was like a 5th string football player as a junior. But that was the year that Snohomish won the state championship. And so I missed out on that. But anyhow, the other hobby I have, or I did have, I haven't been quite some time, is I gained a black belt in Taekwondo when I was quite a bit younger, in the 20s. Let's see. Other things that I've done that may not know about. As a high school golfer, I have the low score for a high school golfer in the Snohomish 76 Snohomish County Amateur. I actually set a course record at Kenwanda Golf Course when I was playing there. I think I was about 18 when I did that. And in college, I played in the national championship for golf, but didn't do real good there. I think we came in middle of the pack, about 18th out of 35 or 40 teams. But that's pretty much it for me. As for the future, kind of waiting on Lynn to retire from CDI so we can do a little bit more traveling. But other than that, pretty happy with life we have here in Arlington.
Great. Any questions for Jeff?
Hey, Jeff, can you elaborate a little more on what you were talking about using weather balloons for cell service? From what one of your sons are doing that? What's that?
Yeah.
All about?
When he was working at Google in the group called Loon, they would use weather balloons to launch up way up into the sky that had a package hanging below it that would supply internet to the area below them, that you could, basically look straight up with the signal, not have to go through trees and hills and so forth. So it was easier to get the signal up and down that way. And they would use the winds in the atmosphere to keep the air balloons over the area. They could generally raise or lower the balloon to allow it to find a different air current and keep it relatively stationary over the area it was trying to serve. And this has been about 4 years ago, I think, but the first area that they were deploying this in was in Puerto Rico. And they had started doing that right before the big hurricane hit Puerto Rico. And consequently, they were one of the first people back into the country, after the big hurricane. He was there with his team to try to get this back up and running about a week after the hurricane was over. Any other questions?
It's just a compliment, though. I mean, I'm really amazed at learning how you actually worked with your dad on the printing side of it, because I mean, I would love to connect with you later offline about self-publishing books, because we are actually putting together some books from the kids, which are written by the kids, and
Oh.
understand like how to print them and publish. Because I was just asking the universe yesterday to actually give me some guidance, like, where I can find such people. And there you go, you're here.
The only problem is that my advice might be a little outdated. I can tell you a number of different things, but anymore, it's something that is a lot of times just done one-off, like I was saying, where you can get your manuscript all put together in book form, get it to Amazon, and they'll just then, when somebody orders one, they'll just print one off and send it out, or two or three. So it's a little different than what I was used to.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually looking at handwritten and hand printed book. I mean, like the printed books. I'm actually doing the old school way, not doing it on Amazon. Actually, having kids especially like to do things the old way,
Oh,
so that they can appreciate and have some more patience to look at stuff. So yeah, thank you.
okay. Now, Madhu, I think are you from India? Is that correct?
I'm from India. Yeah.
It was very interesting to hear the stories that my dad would tell when he came back about the building of the presses that they did there, and how they had very highly skilled people and high technicality of production, but still some of the old ways that they did things were amazing. For example, just because the labor was inexpensive, the some of the things that were done, there's what they call a former board on a press, which is a triangular shaped piece of metal that the paper folds over when it comes down into the folder. And to do that, it cured, you put on a CNC machine and cut out. There, they just had somebody with a hacksaw just cutting a thing for a day to get it cut to the right size. To harden the metal rollers that were used in the press, instead of having some kind of a big furnace, they would just build a fire in the ground, bury them in the charcoal, and feed them a meal in that way. It was amazing to hear the differences. But some of it was so high tech, and some of it was very, very old school. So.
Yeah. I mean, I will definitely connect with you offline because I mean that seems so like India. Which part of India do you know?
I don't remember. This has been such a long time ago. I can't remember doing it. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, Gene Chase, I'm a graduate from 1963 out of Everett High School. And there's a guy in my class, Dave Mack. Was he around?
Dave Mack is the publisher of the Snohomish Tribune.
Oh, I knew he was in the business in East County there somehow. And he was a classmate of mine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know Dave very well. He's mostly down in Palm Springs area, I think now, just retired. So I think he's still the owner of the paper.
Okay.
He doesn't spend a lot of time up here doing a lot with it, I don't think, anymore.
They can send his money to him every month in an envelope.
That's what he likes.
Yeah.